Welcome to Belonging at the Top, driving performance through people. The podcast where leadership gets real and people come first. Your hosts are Dr. Natalie Parks, psychologist, behavior analyst, best-selling author, and your go-to expert for dismantling systems of injustice while building equitable, high-performing teams. And Anthony Butler, leadership coach, thought leader, speaker, and master of helping leaders unlock their team's full potential, one breakthrough at a time. Together, they're here to tackle your toughest leadership challenges with just the right mix of science, strategy, and a sprinkle of humor. In this episode, we tackle othering, the process that turns different into less than and fragments high-performing teams. We provide insight as to how othering operates and how intentional leaders avoid it on their teams.
Welcome back to another episode of Belonging at the Top. We've got another great show lined up for you. Natalie, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am well. Today, we're going to talk about othering and all the things that lead to it. Again, as we can continue to explore some of the foundational concepts of creating cultures of belonging and what it means to be a leader who's intentional about creating that type of culture, I think that understanding what othering is and how it develops is something that leaders should know and understand so they can avoid doing it. That's going to be our journey for the day. And we can start off by, let's define what othering is. What do you think of when you think of the term othering?
So I think the first thing to do is maybe normalize othering a little bit. I think sometimes when we talk about topics and we talk about how we can do things better, we also need to recognize that this is a phenomenon that everyone does to some extent. But to me, at least, othering is recognizing that maybe there is a person or a group of people who are different from you, and you are putting a negative judgment on that difference, right? So you're not like me, you have a different opinion, you don't work as well. You know, I'm in sales and you're in production, and aren't salespeople better? All of those things. So it's putting a negative judgment on somebody because of that difference. They are not us, they are other.
I think for me, the distinction is all of that plus the action, because you are the person in power or a person with influence, is that you're taking those thoughts and you're creating a separation or a negative workplace or social consequence for the person that you have those thoughts about, or the group of people you have that thought about. I think we all have, again, we talked about it in the kind of a pre-show, we all categorize, we all judge, we all stereotype, we all make generalizations, but it's when you take those thoughts and go the extra step of taking those negative thoughts and excluding folks. I think that's what makes it othering versus just having horrible, ugly, or normal negative thoughts. So how do we get there, though? I think it's probably prudent to talk about how these thoughts develop. Like, why do we categorize in the first place? So when you were going through your doctoral studies and you were studying behavior and the human brain, why do we naturally, and by we, I mean all of us, why do we naturally categorize? What's the rationale behind that?
So there's several mechanisms that are at play when we think about kind of the whole concept of othering, right? Because first, I have to recognize me versus others. I have to recognize group one versus group two. And so just biologically, we are all wired in a certain way to recognize very quickly and unconsciously whether things are dangerous or safe. I don't know how many of us talk about this, but our brains have evolved basically to the point of us living in the wild. They have not caught up evolutionary wise. Our brains haven't caught up to civilization as we know it today. So we are still very much operating from a biological standpoint of every time I walk out into the world, every time something changes in my environment, I hear a loud sound, a light flashes, whatever, I have to immediately recognize, and my brain is set up to do that, if this is a safe situation or this is danger, and now my fight or flight response kicks in. So step one, recognize, is this friend or foe, so to speak. But the other thing is more of a learning concept of we learn how to put different things in groups. And without going too deep, we learn at very young ages that circles and squares are different. And we don't necessarily have judgment about that. We just learn they are different in some sort of way. A square has 4 sides. A circle is no sides.
Round.
One side.
A circle is round.
A circle is round.
There are no angles. I think the definition is actually what? There are no angles in a circle?
There are no angles and it has one side.
Does it have any sides though?
It has one side.
I don't know. We're going to ask our mathematician friends to chime in on that one, because I would say a circle has no side.
How many sides does a circle have? It has to have a side to be a circle. Otherwise, it's nothing.
To be continued in our nerdy conversation after the episode.
We learn how things are categorized. And when we then think about connecting it to othering, circles and squares don't necessarily teach us to other, but we also categorize people, right? We categorize people as friend or foe. They're dangerous or safe. We tend to think that we are safe. And so people who share some characteristic with us may go into our group of safe. But those who are different go into a different or other category.
Right. I think it goes, but let's spend some time there, because I think it's easy. I think there's some other examples that I think folks can kind of more relate to, especially with, I've always found this to be critical for people who think that I'm a good person, I'm not racist, I don't other people, not knowing that there is like we've already established, there is a natural component to it, right? And I think even though I'd agree with that evolutionarily, biologically, our brains have not changed. We still are assessing danger every moment that we are awake. And I don't think that's ever will change. I think what does change is what the dangers are. We are normally in our day-to-day lives, don't have to determine if those berries are good to eat or those. We don't have to determine if that animal is going to eat us or that an animal I should eat. We do have to determine that light is red. I should probably stop. So I think that's what's evolved. It is the type of danger, or the light's yellow. I either speed up or slow down, but I got to do something different than continuing as I was. So I think it's what we analyze or what dangers we analyze changes because society's changed. But I think the foundational concept of fight or flight, is it danger? Am I safe? Do I feel protected? That probably won't change. I think if it does change, we're no longer human and we're AI at that point.
I'm not gonna jump down that hole.
That could be another episode too.
I think the other thing that's important is that this way that we put things in categories is not just related to kind of safe danger, right?
Oh, no, so definitely.
But we need to be able to do it automatically, because we can't spend our whole day figuring out if a banana is a banana versus a lemon. Like, we're not reasoning through that in a conscious way, right? If I go to the grocery store and I want bananas and I see lemons, I don't walk that way. I don't think like, oh, well, look, it's another yellow fruit. Right. And is that a banana? No, because it's rounder. It's not long. It's blah, blah, blah. So the way that we categorize everything, people included, is that, we're making these immediate, usually unconscious recognition at the very bare minimum, and usually judgments about things.
And it happens in nanoseconds, right? So one of the things I do in some of my trainings when talking about this process, I call it the thought development process or the socialization process, which starts with how our brain processes data. So the mnemonic I use is that we make 7 impressions within 7 seconds of meeting someone. It's a lot faster than that. It's a lot faster than 7 seconds. But the point is that it's automatic because of, again, how you've been socialized, how you were raised, what things that you've been exposed to and taught explicitly and implicitly based on where you were raised and who raised you. So I think that's where I give people the benefit of the doubt. Like, those crazy things you think, you just didn't decide to think crazy today. It's been part of you all your life. You just didn't know it was crazy until someone said, you probably shouldn't use those words, or you probably shouldn't do that. And then you go, why not?
Like, you probably shouldn't use the word crazy to describe.
Exactly. I did it on purpose. See how you fell right into my trap? Not that people need an escape to be like, oh, I thought I was good, but I'm not. And that's not it. We all have these thoughts that can be deemed to be inappropriate because when we were raised and how we grew up, they weren't thought to be inappropriate. Like we've
Right.
talked about some of our old St. Louis lingo before, right? So if you've never been to a high school, but you can tell me about people at that high school, because it was a high school across town that everybody in your family didn't like, you automatically didn't like them because you were taught not to like them. So that's one
Right.
thing. And how we reference Chinese restaurants in St. Louis, which I'm not going to do in an episode again. Go back and listen before. But growing up, for us, it was not.
We didn't know.
Because we didn't know, and everyone around us did it, right? So were we othering?
Right.
I wouldn't say necessarily othering them, but we did have language that was inappropriate that we should have known, but it's because of how we were socialized. So I wanted to make those distinctions about that actual process, is that, you don't jump to othering just because you have negative thoughts. The othering is actual behavior, but you do get those thoughts from the people who raised you, where you were raised, and the experiences you had throughout your life. So they constantly change, so you can avoid it. And we'll get to how to not other later. But I wanted to definitely make sure we spent the time on understanding that we all categorize, we all have our own generalizations, which I think are natural, and we can't stop that. We then take those categorizations and generalizations and we start going down that rabbit hole of negative thoughts. And then we start to stereotype. And I think that stereotype then gets us to later bad behavior that leads to othering. So I just wanted to kind of go over, especially spend some time early to go through that process. There's the science is out there. We don't have to talk about all the studies, talk about neuroscience and socialization. We already know. And maybe we'll do something in a companion piece to this where we'll talk about those things. But I think that is something that's critical for people to understand, especially if you're feeling bad. Listen, like, someone said I was doing something inappropriate. I just didn't know, and it wasn't my intent. It didn't have to be your intent, but it doesn't mean that you are off the hook either. It just means now that you are now consciously aware that your behavior was considered negative. So you've got to do something about it and make a change. But
the other thing that I learned actually just this morning on a podcast that I was listening to, I am in a kind of neuropsych deep dive right now. And we also tend to, as humans, remember and learn from, and things stay with us that are paired with negative emotion more so than positive emotion. And again, there's a biological reason for that, because when something is dangerous, when there's a tiger, I can't pause. I can't think like, well, this one time, maybe the tiger's not so bad. No, the tiger's going to eat me. So I need to
get away. You don't want to forget, right?
Right. And so when we think about othering, we also have to know that there's a tendency for humans, and that's not just negative experiences or experiences with others. It's negative experiences of our own. So even if you think about young children, their first memories are often those memories that have very, very strong emotion, and very often negative emotion, because that's what stays with us. And so if you translate that to people, if you have an experience with someone and it's a very, very negative experience, you're naturally, because we learn how to categorize very, very early on, and it's something we do, you're going to put them in a category, and you're then going to other them and negatively judge them. And so if another person comes along,
like them and think like them, or from the same place that they're from, like we start to expand it beyond to all of that.
And it could be anything, right? It could be the way you walk. And so the next time I see somebody that walks like you, now they're in that category. But it can also, on a more general thing, and we are also taught, especially in the United States, we are taught to categorize people by color or race or ethnicity, gender, identification, sexual identification, religious identification, where you live, how much money you make, what your job is. These are things that if you think about the US Census, this is how we learn very early on how to categorize people. And so it's less likely that I might get triggered or other you based on the cologne you're wearing, because nobody's talking about that every single day. It's more likely that I can other you based on your race, because we talk about that every day, even if it's inadvertent, you know?
And that's so now talking about how we are merging concepts or how they all overlap, is that all those protected classes and facets of the human experience you just mentioned are all on the diversity wheel. So anybody doing this work before, if you've been through a DEI class, you probably have been exposed to the diversity wheel or the concept of the diversity wheel. And so those factors, whether it be internal, things that we can't change about ourselves, like our age, race, gender, sexual orientation, et cetera, versus the external factors of our lives, where we live, where we go to school, what job function we do, what career we chose, we still judge people based on where they fit and how we categorize them along those things. I want to make that correlation for people who may have been through similar classes and trainings before, that this is, again, you've heard it before. It's not a new concept, but this is where it comes from. And this is some of the behaviors that we want to try to avoid in the workplace.
So now that we at least somewhat have covered kind of what othering is, where it comes from, I think the next question is, what do we do about it?
And what does it look like?
I think
let's talk about what it looks like in the workplace, right? So I think we've talked about societal examples, but what does it look like? How do you know when you're being othered? Maybe that's the point, right? How do you
know when you're othering?
Right. So let's do it from both sides. How do you know when you're othering, or how do you know when you have been othered?
So one of the things that I always do a quick check to is I tend to make very quick and immediate decisions about people. And because I do what I do and study what I study, I know it comes from many of the things we just talked about. And I actively try to undo all of those negative immediate snap judgments, sometimes a little too much. But one thing that I do when I'm observing myself is I tend to really think about, why am I likely to go pick this person immediately? Or even very subtle things. You might make yourself more available to one person versus another person, right? Somebody asks you for a meeting or a quick check-in, or, hey, can you call me? You got 5 minutes. You pick up the phone as soon as you have 5 minutes. Versus other people, you're like, it's going to take a week or two. I don't really have a lot of free time, and blah, blah, blah. There are lots and lots of different reasons that you may do that. But if you see there's a tendency of individuals that you shy away from versus those that you gravitate towards, the likeliness that you are othering those individuals that you're shying away from is extremely high, whether you intend to or not.
And it could be, and so, I think it's a good time to make a distinction too, that othering is not necessarily bad depending on why you are othering.
Well, no, like I'm going to other a narcissist to get into a relationship with them, right? Yeah. Like I don't want to be in a relationship with somebody who is narcissistic, right,
or someone at work who you've already established, if you listen to our previous episodes, that they have a low say-do correspondence, right? So if someone who, right? if someone constantly says, I can do that, and then they fail, they're late, they don't do it on time, or they do it and the product is crap, I'm not going to choose you next time I have a group project, because I already know that there are some performance issues, and I'm wondering why you're still here at the company, because why they're allowing you to exist with your C- performance every day. So that is an example, again, of a workplace othering, but it's based on an actual, it's not a stereotype. It's a generalization based on what you've known your experience to be with them is.
Although I might argue, just to play the other side, that most people are giving you C- performances because their environments are not set up to give you A performances. As a true behavior analyst, the learner or the person is always right, and their behavior is really telling you what their environment is doing as opposed to what they internally are doing. But we can have that talk maybe a little later.
Listen, if work starts at 8 and you're there at 8:15, then that's a problem.
You have an environment that doesn't allow you to be successful. I'm not saying there shouldn't be a consequence. I'm just saying.
All right.
Here's an example. I'm going to give you a quick example, and then we're going to get back on track. I was working at this agency. We'll just call it an agency. When I got there, there was that exact expectation. So let's just say everybody was supposed to be there at 8 a.m. People were rolling in at 8:30, 8:45. They got, there are other people that arrive who now can't do what they need to do because these people aren't here. It was a whole thing. And when I got there, I was like, what in the world is happening? Well, there were no contingencies in place. So administration was mad that everybody was late, but nobody was saying anything to them about being late. Nobody was doing anything about it, so to speak. So we rolled out a new policy, a late policy, of course. If you're more than 5 minutes after your arrival time, then your pay is going to get docked, you're going to get written up, all these things. And we put in, because we're good behavior analysts, a reinforcement system. If you're arriving on time every single day, then there are perks that get unlocked and opened and all of that. All of a sudden, within 2 weeks, everybody was mad for a minute, but within 2 weeks, everybody's on time. That's not a person issue.
It was a process issue.
It was a contingency. It was the environment. The environment was not setting them up to be successful.
All right, I'm going to let your example stand for now so we can get back on track. Because I have a whole lot of things about your environment.
Well, you othered those late people, and I just actively worked to not other them.
You did. And so I guess we're not so off track, right? So it's another example of how that can play out in the workplace, right? So if that's the case, what that demonstrates is how you can recognize that you are othering someone and finding a way to not do that and to make this environment more productive and successful for everyone, therefore increasing their feeling of belonging in the organization. And as a leader and as an HR person, I still say you only do that with people you care about in the relationship who that you would consider a regretted loss if they were to go, right? So I don't think we make, although it could be a culture improvement, we typically don't do those for folks who are historically, for a variety of reasons, not just for being late, are not working on the team or in the environment. And again, we just want to your point, making sure that the reason why they're not working is because they've been othered. Right. I think that's another layer of evaluation that as a leader listening to this, before you make those decisions, going back to your personal example of why did I put this person in this category in the first place? So then examining that to make sure it's not based on some negative life experience that you're now projecting on them, thereby othering them due to no fault of their own.
Yeah. And I think the best ways to really start thinking about things is, to one, I always operate under the assumption that maybe not nobody, but I would say the vast majority, like 99.9% of people, do not wake up in the morning and roll out of bed and want to be the worst worker at the company. Most people don't make that their goal. And yet there are people who are the worst workers at the organization, right? And so then the question becomes, like, if that's not truly what you're wanting to do, and most people who are failing don't feel good about that. So if that's the case, then the question becomes why? And that's where I go to the very objective things, right? Is it because you're not included, you're not giving opportunities? Is this a worker who maybe came in super eager? They were the eager beaver, and maybe they got on your nerves because they were too eager. And so you tried to tone that down, and maybe you toned it down a little too much. Maybe they were the person who always had that annoying question, or who have, a different energy matching to you, and that was tiring for you, whatever that is. Maybe you recognize that it just so happens all of the people you promoted in the last 3 years that you were a leader look like you or behave like you in some sort of way.
They come from the same school,
it wasn't necessarily conscious.
All that stuff, right?
Exactly. But you are othering, right? And so I think it's important to also point out that even if you're not actively othering, but you are actively inning or associating with, you are actively othering by default, right? And so some people focus on like, well, no, I'm just focused on the people like me, and it's not that other people are bad, but I just like who I like. And that's fine if you want to be social, but it's not fine when you're in an organization.
Right. And I think it's another form of bias, right? That's a halo bias at that point, right? Because I've categorized you as being familiar and therefore safe because you look, act, think like me, came from the same place as me, you're automatically good, halo, because of that. And so part of it, again, I think Did we do an episode on bias? I can't recall. We've talked about it before, though. We've definitely talked about it. Maybe not an explicit episode, but because we're in season 2 now, we've had a whole season 1 that I can't remember.
We have a whole season 1 we forgot
about. But no, I think that is another example, though. Again, just kind of making these correlations for our listeners that, we definitely use the halo bias, that people who they could be not performing as well, but because I like them, they look like me, I have fun with them, I have generally good thoughts about them, then I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt without subconsciously, even when they don't deserve it, only because I have a positive internal thought about them. So we want to avoid using, to your part, I guess the word you used was inning, right? Where I'm not othering them, but I'm inning them. It's because, and the reason I do that is because of a halo bias.
Yeah. And I would say that, the other thing you brought up is, how do I know if I'm being othered? And this does go back to, or probably ties in with, a lot of the work I do on bias and research I do on bias. And I think one of the most difficult things when we're thinking about bias and othering and all of these behaviors of separation is that you really can't necessarily decide based on one interaction with one person at one time. You really have to know if there's a pattern, right? You could just not like me, period. It may not have anything to do with the fact that I am white and a female. You might just not like me. And that's not othering in the way that we are talking about it. But if it happens to be that every person that now is like, well, they don't like me, they don't like me, they don't like me, is also female, or is also white, or is white and female, then we have a pattern, and that is othering. And so I think you have to look at the patterns and look at, are they inning people? So we have equal opportunity assholes that I call. These are just people who, it doesn't matter who you are, you can get it. And I'm just going to be a jerk to you all the time. There are other people that are not equal opportunity jerks, and those are the individuals that are othering. Most of us don't know we're doing it unless we start really paying acute attention to our patterns of responding. Do I tend to give this profile of person more opportunities, more time with me, more whatever, more likely to promote, better performance reviews, and these other people? And so, if you feel like you're being othered, I would say there's also something to be said about that feeling. Like, sometimes and you don't have all the data and evidence to point to it. And so take that feeling and look for patterns. There are always patterns of response.
And I think, and I want to go back just a minute to my last comment, only because I use the term halo effect. We should probably get the opposite term. It's the horn effect, right? Meaning that because I have, and even the example I gave about the person who has a low say-do correspondence, that if I've established that pattern with you and I'm not picking you for teams, I think you will always be ineffective because of my pattern with you. And that's horn effect, or the horn bias, which is the opposite of halo bias. So we want to make sure that, like to your point, that as a leader, we are not applying our negative biases because of one interaction, even if we said it was a pattern, to a group of people who you don't have that experience with. And I think that's probably the other side, the extension of othering. It's not how you treat one person. It's how you treat a group of people, right? It's not just, it's a bias towards a group of people, an exclusionary or negative impression or behavior or towards a group of people based on a negative impression about that group of people. So my example, again, of that person with the low say-do correspondence, if I happen to know that person is a graduate of U City High School and I start to discriminate against everybody from that inferior high school, then yes, that would be a horn effect. That's Natalie's high school. And again, going back to our roots of St. Louis, of where'd you go to high school, has a lot of social weight to it.
And contrary to Anthony's belief, it is actually the best high school. And you can ask anyone from U-City and we will tell you the same.
I use it as an example. I did not say it was my belief. It was tongue in cheek. However,
I just want the record to show.
That's why I had to clean it up. Because I don't want all of our St. Louis friends who I know graduated from U-City, and there are a lot coming for me after they hear this episode. So it was used for educational purposes and educational purposes only. I love you.
I am going to tell them exactly what minute to listen to. We have said a lot of things. I think maybe 2 or 3 quick take-home points. Maybe I'll share one and you can share another. I think number 1, start paying attention to how you are interacting with people, what opportunities you're giving, how your performance reviews, anything that you can do to observe yourself and look for patterns. And look for, even maybe do an internal check of how am I feeling when I'm interacting with certain people, and look for those patterns and look for the common qualities. And that's how you start to recognize your pattern of others.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the extension of that is, again, making sure that your negative beliefs and impressions or experience with a person does not translate to other people who fit into whatever group you've already categorized them in. Can you stop making these judgments about folks? No, it's natural. You're going to do it. I think where the rubber meets the road is that we need to understand and make sure that whatever those beliefs are, that they're rooted in fact, they're rooted in experience with that person, and they are limited to that person. So if you are responsible for recruiting your team, are you recruiting from all the same schools because you have a halo bias toward that school, those schools, and that's the only school you look at? You might be unintentionally excluding other schools because you have a positive influence or positive experience with that particular school or set of work experience. So that's an example, again, of kind of giving the real, how do we do this at work? If you are responsible for assigning shifts, assigning teams and project teams, look at your process of how you assign those. If you are concerned about it, or if someone says, hey, I feel like I'm being left out, red flag, right? You should, you're now been put on notice. There's something maybe amiss, and it could be they're being left out because of their performance. I'm not saying that you have to go back and undo your decision, but if you care about being intentional about creating a culture of belonging at your place of work or in your team or whatever it may be in your volunteer and personal life, that you are doing it in a way that you can really point to the fact that, nope, it's just you. It's not people who look, think, act like you. It's you who are being, and you can identify that, and you can really explain that in a way that makes sense, and hopefully turning into a coaching moment. So if that is a person that you value on the team, they understand why and what their steps are to be included the next time, but make it performance-based, tied to something that is objective, not just to, I don't really like you because you went to U-City. I had to bring it back. And with that, thank you all for listening to this episode in season 2 of Belonging at the Top. And remember, great leadership starts with belonging.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Belonging at the Top. We hope it sparked new ideas for fostering belonging in your leadership journey. If you found it insightful, please like and subscribe to our podcast for more thought-provoking discussions. We'd also love it if you could share it with others who might benefit from the conversation. If you have any feedback or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please email us or drop us a note on Instagram or LinkedIn.